Today, the topic is healthcare. And because there's so much going on with the new administration and, trying to be more efficient, and you hear all kinds of people talking about where can we cut expenses and be more efficient without cutting services. Blockchain and healthcare is a perfect connection, especially in light of one of the presidential candidates in the United States, RFK. He made a commitment that if he won the White House, that he would put the U.S. federal government on a blockchain. Well, he didn't win the White House, but he did win HHS, right? So now a lot of people are talking about, can we use blockchain to be more efficient in healthcare? One of the things that we see blockchain really, and really blockchain and AI, what blockchain can help us do is with all of this data coming out of the healthcare system, AI now gives us an opportunity to use that data in a way that was never imaginable before. Precision medicine as an example. The problem with all of that data getting used is essentially the privacy, the security, how this rich data that's coming out can be used in a whole new data economy. When you look at all of the different ways that blockchain and AI can help us in terms of reducing costs from a healthcare perspective, you got all the administrative costs, right? Clinical trials.
That we have misaligned incentives between stakeholder groups. Something intrinsic to blockchain technology and the movement that is Web3 is that it represents not only a system of operating and governing entirely new trust and security and compliance models, it allows the possibility of the discovery of dynamic incentives that can be optimized potentially so much faster than the pace of, contractual changes or legislative changes that could occur. By combining blockchain technologies with the extraordinary potential of AI, we have an opportunity to make a nonlinear exponential impact.
How do we move the ball in this space?
So first thing you focus on is making sure that the right people and only the right people have access to the right care. We move to a tokenized payment, cost and payment model, which basically says that when I go to get an X-ray done as a Medicaid recipient, I show my Medicaid token, and I receive a token from the government that lets the doctor charge me $72. Average healthcare isn't the expensive part; it's the complex care that's the hard part. Low-hanging fruit for public health. Tokenize eligibility, tokenize rate sheet and payments, tokenize your referral system. And will that solve every problem? No, but can you get rid of $500 billion out of $1 trillion? I submit you can.
Of our nation's $4.9 trillion of total spend, 34% of that is coming out of the public sector. Each of the areas that Pradeep mentioned presuppose that you actually know that the patient who is submitting a bill or accessing a resource is alive, is the actual patient that is the intended patient, and is not a duplicate of the same human receiving other or duplicative resources or services. And using identity primitives from or technological components from the field of blockchain and Web3 technologies, and creating a system of identification that not only makes it possible to also offer privacy and anonymity in areas that are particularly sensitive, suicidality, substance use disorder, that ability through the same set of technologies to enable the programmatic efficiency and the fraud mitigation and provide dignified and safe and emotionally accessible care in some of our nation's most challenging areas, including one that heavily impacts a population that I focus on very closely, which is United States veterans, where we have a tragic number of veterans take their life every day in the United States, despite ever escalating expenditure seeking to resolve that. This fundamental principle of identity as the cornerstone of a foundation of a new system, something in our industry that has talked about the transition from volume to value. What is the problem with moving from volume to value? The heart of it is data. How do you know what outcomes are actually achieved by whom and when? And how could you move that into something more like real-time settlement systems?
Here in the United States, we have this new organization called DOGE, which is actually dismantling the government. Is this a good thing for healthcare or a bad thing for healthcare? Or
government in the United States is a payer, not a provider, meaning the government writes the check but doesn't deliver healthcare. What DOGE can do is to certainly align the interests of the patient with government policy. Where I see the opportunity lying today is in all the stalled initiatives, accountable care initiatives that were blocked because of misappropriate funding was not allocated. I think what government can do and sees the opportunity to do, one hopes, is to actually invest the vast amount of available dollars in things that actually drive better outcomes for the patient. I'll reallocate funds to projects that actually are impactful in terms of quality of care, access to care, and cost of care, which is typically not where money goes. The second area where I see government should absolutely do something is to make the data the right of the consumer. The president can, with one executive order, can mandate that the patient has unfettered right to their data.
But Heather, would you please talk two things: the health data economy, and then also what role AI mind systems is playing in helping with standardization and the BMM.
I'd like to highlight for the audience a couple of background principles that apply to DOGE's thinking. The intent is to replace broken systems with net new. It's like applying the zero-based budgeting to tech. The ethic of being more open to embracing the actual current state of the art, the right now best that exists in the world from a technology perspective, is a wonderful opportunity. All of these systems and all of that economic value creates oceans of data. Right now, that data economy, I rigorously sized at $66.56 billion annually as of 2023. Today, 0% of that accrues to the individual producers of that data. And therefore, if you believe in the rational actor theory of economics, as well as behavioral economics, you recognize that individual people lack incentives themselves to help overcome the blockers that might affect their ability to engage in health promoting behaviors and overcome the obstacles in their life that we might refer to as social, environmental, or occupational determinants of health. Then what happens with that data when it is under the custody of an individual becomes endless. And when it converges with AI that can become self-sovereign, trustworthy, and absent any conflict of interest with the individual, that's when the incredible potential, both economic growth for the individual, because that is clearly a very valuable financial asset, and the attainment of health and well-being goals for the person becomes at hand, because they have now the ability to make fullest use of that information using the absolute latest, most bleeding edge tools implemented and operated in a way that assures that they are not being unduly influenced by parties who have an agenda that is at best a Venn diagram with the person's own agenda.
And Heather is right. Once that data is in your hands, you become the interoperability hub. Trying to connect these 5,000 entities to each other, forget it, never going to happen. But if you give me the data and everybody comes to me for my data as a single source of truth, where I have the records, you don't need to go to the pharmacy to ask for my past prescriptions. You don't need to go to the insurance company to ask for my past claims. You don't need to go to the doctor to ask for my past medical records. It's with me. So we have already this thing called Blue API, where you can download all your Medicare and Medicaid data from government. Mandate the Blue API works for every one of these 5,000 organizations. And you will have a completely different model for patient-centered healthcare.
Human beings have to make smart decisions. Human beings that are not going to individually become domain experts in a new family of very intricate technology. There must be systems of assurance that can provide, that can shine the light on a way to go forward with elevated trust, or at least a third-party attestation of various circumstances being met. GBA is leading the way on creating that system, which interjects a vital piece into how human beings have to make decisions, especially for rapid and efficient action.